And I love her. I love everybody in this class. If I talk too much about y'all, I'll be in a puddle of tears. So I'm going to try not to do that. This lesson was designed, I think, to pull out everything about that parable, the parable of the wedding, and so I think our lessons are probably going to cross over and dovetail each other, so to speak. But this was challenging. This was a challenging lesson. I felt like that I needed to use a particular method, format in writing this speech, getting this speech ready, and it needs a little background, so I'll fill you in a little bit. Back at Sywell, I wanted to teach a ladies' class. Excuse me. And I asked the educational director if I could have a Sunday morning class. And he said, yes. And I could see the wheels turning in his head. How many are we going to have out of the other classes? And that was a factor. The class was a huge success on a Sunday morning. Our ladies' class during the week had dissolved, and so we didn't have one. And so the ladies just poured into this class, and it was called Great Questions That Jesus Asked. And the format I used was something that, like I said, I don't ordinarily use it in writing speeches, but I wanted to share this with you because that's what I did for writing the speech. Basically, what I did was I had, with that particular class, I had a twofold twofold purpose. One was to incorporate as many women as I could in the class to teach the class, preferably women who had not taught before. And it was amazing. I got like 6 ladies, and I thought I was lucky if I got 2, but I got 6 ladies who would teach that class. And the second objective was the format itself, which would teach women how to study the Bible. We deal with topics all the time, and those are good. We deal with passages all the time, and those are good. But what I wanted to do was show that you can take a good study method called the inductive method, and you can start with a verse or verses. And what you do is you read those and contemplate on those. Then you study the verses before it and the verses after it, preferably the chapter before it, the chapter after it. And then you see that general context, not just the immediate, but the general context. And then after that, you think about what was Jesus' reasoning or the writer's reasoning on this. And that's important. You've got to come from their perspective, and why they may have written it. And after that, it's application. It's just plain old application. Ladies, we can read the book and we can study the book and we can memorize the book, but if we don't apply it to our lives, it doesn't have any purpose. So that's what I wanted to do with this lesson too. So I believe we'll see that the beginning of this inductive process is going back to chapter 21, and what we'll see is what happened to Jesus leading up to that parable. And I think it's important. We'll go over this a little bit more toward the end, but I think I'll give you a clue. What it is, it's building. There's a crescendo, and it's building, and part of it is summed up with this parable. So I'm going to read the parable to you. The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding. And they were not willing to come. Isn't that amazing? They were not willing to come. Again, he sent out other servants, saying, "Tell those who are invited, See, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fatted cattle are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the wedding." But they made light of it and went their own ways, one to his own farm, another to his business, and the rest seized his servants, treated them spitefully, and killed them. But when the king heard about it, he was furious, and he sent out his armies and destroyed those murderers and burned up their city. Then he said to his servants, "The wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy." Now that's telling, isn't it? They're not worthy. Therefore, go into the highways, and as many as you find, invite to the wedding. So those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all whom they found, both bad and good. And the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. So he said to him, "Friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment?" And the man was speechless. The king turned and said to the servants, "Bind him hand and foot, take him away and cast him into an outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen." It's a very telling parable, isn't it? And I think what we're going to see is the nature of the Jews through all of this. So let's go back to chapter 21, because we've seen the immediate context. Now let's get the general context. Jesus went into the temple in chapter 21, and he was enraged because what were they doing in the temple? Buying and selling, yes. They were buying and selling, and he overturned their tables and the tables of the money changers. And can you just see the money rolling around everywhere and them scuffling, trying to get theirs and not somebody else's? Or maybe trying to get somebody else's, who knows. But at that time, Jesus also had the blind and the lame coming to him. And so what did he do? He healed them. And this made the Jews incensed. I mean, they were incensed that he did this, and they criticized him. Ordinarily, when somebody gets well, aren't you happy about it? But they were not. They continued to question him. "By whose authority do you do these things?" Then the Pharisees went and plotted how they might entangle him in his talk. So they were pretty devious, pretty conniving, weren't they? But Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, "Why do you test me, you hypocrites?" And then we're going to get into a few more hypocritical things, aren't we? And so in verses 33 and 34 of that chapter, 21, then Jesus told them the parable of the wicked vine dressers, which figuratively represented the Jews and their hatred of God's messengers. Even his son, whom they eventually did what? Murdered. And God finally had enough. And that is, the man in the parable had finally had enough. "Therefore, I say to you," the king said, "the kingdom of God will be taken from you and given to a nation bearing the fruits of it. And whoever falls on the stone will be broken, but on whomever it falls, it will grind him to powder." Now, when the chief priests and Pharisees heard his parables, they perceived that he was speaking of them. Now, aren't they sharp? Because that's exactly what he was. But when they sought to lay hands on him, they feared the multitudes, because they took him, that is, the multitudes took him for what? A prophet. And remember, in the Old Testament, Moses wrote, "They shall raise up a prophet like me. And they understood that prophet meant possibly Messiah. And they understood that. Chapter 21 ends wrapping up that ugliness, that Jesus faced, and that he was continuing to face from the Pharisees. So now we've done chapter 21 and we've done chapter 22. Now let's go to chapter 23, which begins, Jesus spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples, saying, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do. But do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do." In other words, they were hypocrites. In that day and age, that was really a term that was used in theater because they wore masks to portray certain characters. And mostly it was men in the theater. So when there was a woman's role, what would the man put on? He would put on a mask, and he would pretend to be a woman. Well, and that was where we get the word hypocrite. And that's what the Jews were doing. They were pretending to be somebody else. They were pretending to be righteous, but were they really? Not at all. So Jesus went on in this chapter, in chapter 23, to pronounce 8 woes to the scribes and Pharisees, and he called them hypocrites. They are probably the most scathing words of indictment that Jesus spoke in one setting when he was teaching people. I mean, it's over and over and over again about the woes that are pronounced on them. And now, ladies, we've seen that immediate context. Now we've seen the broader context, or the general context. Let's look again now at chapter 22, and let's piece this all together. And that's inductive reasoning. That's taking all of it together and sifting through it and getting the proper reasoning. So with that, we will say that we understand that the wedding banquet is talking about the final coming together of Christ, the groom. Christ is the groom, and the bride, his church, which up to that time, the church had been the virgin betrothed to Christ. And remember what betrothal was like in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, in Bible times? They were called married, but they were not, the marriage was not consummated. So it's a virgin who will be given to her husband at some point in time. Now, according to that culture, betrothal took place months, maybe even when there were children, or years prior to the actual wedding and feast. And the exact day would be set, but not necessarily the time of day or the actual precise thing that took place. The invitation to the banquet was extended in advance. And that's why you see the servants going out and extending the invitation. But the time would not be given to them until all things were ready. The meal preparations were made, and the feast was ready, sitting on the table, and then they would call and bring those people in. So the kingdom of heaven, and this is focusing on those guests, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son. So we understand that the kingdom is God, the king is God, the Father, who arranged a marriage for his son, that is Jesus. And Paul wrote about this marriage of the bride and Christ because he compared it to our physical marriages, didn't he? He said that the spiritual part was a mystery. So he took the plain and simple marriage between husband and woman and tried to compare the two so they could get that understanding. The church was betrothed to Christ, and Paul talks about this. Paul said, "For I am jealous for you with godly jealousy, for I have betrothed you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin for Christ." So there we have it. The church was that chaste virgin. And that's in 2 Corinthians 11, verse 2. And Jesus also wrote in Ephesians about the husband's love of the wife, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. That's an incredible kind of love, isn't it? That he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word. What does that sound like? Does it sound like baptism? Yeah. And that he might, let's make this separate. That he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or anything, any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. Ephesians 5:25 through 27. Ladies, why do we put so much emphasis on not sinning and on taking care of sin if it's in our lives and taking care of it quickly by repenting? Why do we do that? Because the church is supposed to be holy and without blemish. And that's the way God wanted it to be. Well, the king in the parable sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding. And they were not willing to come, it said. So the servants that were sent out to have the invitations were the righteous ones who delivered the invitation to the Jews. So the Jews received the invitation first, didn't they? And who were those righteous people? Well, they were the ones who, the prophets and those who came after them. Again, he said, he sent out other servants saying, "Tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and fatted cattle, and killed and all things are ready. Come to the wedding." But they made light of it and went their ways, one to his own farm, another to his business, and the rest seized his servants, treated them spitefully, and killed them. And this refers to the Jews who throughout the period of the prophets and maybe even before, but certainly during the period of the prophets, were telling. They were telling about Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. How many of you can almost recite the words from Isaiah 53? And how many of you can just almost recite the words in Psalm 22? They were telling about Jesus coming. So they were leading up right to his rejection, and God's messengers were then rejected. The rejection continued after the betrothal. The church. This is after the church was established. That persecution went on, because remember, the church is on earth, and the bride is, and the groom is in heaven. So what we're going to see is that wedding is in heaven, and we're in the betrothal state. It's a solid deal. It's a confirmed deal, and serious by law. But we're not there yet, are we? And after the church was established, that rejection came in the form of disrespectful, we would call them disrespectful guests, who were all about themselves, with no regard for the king, let alone the wedding they were invited to attend. So this is the king noted it, that they weren't worthy to come. And he was furious. He sent out his armies and destroyed those murderers and burned up their city. What do you think this might represent? And I'm going to say might because Scripture doesn't tell us it represents it. But what do you think it might represent? The destruction of Jerusalem, perhaps? Because remember, the bride has not gone to the wedding feast has not taken place yet. It may refer to that. What did they do to Jerusalem? They destroyed it. They burned it. Jesus said, "Not one stone will be left on the other," and that's exactly what took place. So then he said to his servants, "The wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Therefore, go into the highways, and as many as you find, invite to the wedding." So those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all whom they found, both bad and good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. And notice here, ladies, that the king told his servants to go out literally everywhere. Everywhere. What does that sound like? The Great Commission, doesn't it? And go everywhere and gather together all whom they found. And both what? Good and bad. Are there good people in the world who don't have Christ? Yeah, they're good people. Sincerely thinking that they're doing good with whatever they're involved in. Are there bad people? Oh, me. There are evil people. But the servants who were sent out to invite all who would come represent those apostles who were the first to go out into Jerusalem, and then Judea, and then Samaria, and then where? The uttermost parts of the earth. So it's kind of like a circle that just started in Jerusalem and went farther and farther out. And that's exactly what happened. They were given the command, the apostles were given the command, go into all the world and teach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized shall be saved. That is, they would be welcome to be part of the great wedding. They would be part of the betrothed. Well, on the day of Pentecost, there were men and women from many nations, weren't there? And certainly Jews, but also proselytes. And when Peter was sent to Cornelius, the door was thrown wide open, wasn't it? For not just the Jews, but the Gentiles as well. And it opened the way for the Savior to give his blessing and give his salvation to those, whether Jew or Gentile. Okay, then in verse 11, but when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. So he said to him, "Friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment?" And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servant, "Bind him hand and foot, take him away, and cast him out into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." What does this sound like? It does. It sounds like hell. So who is the man, and what was the wedding garment that he was supposed to have on? Christ. And how do we put on Christ? Baptism, exactly. The wedding garment is baptism. When we put on the Lord, and we use that phrase often, don't we? When we put on the Lord like a garment, we are baptized. Paul said, "For as many of you as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ." Ladies, we wear him like a garment. And we don't want to expose that garment as a filthy, raggy thing. We want it to be a pure thing, pure thing that we wear, and expose that purity to the world in our example, in our lives. We must remember that also that just as a person can put on the Christian Christian baptism, he or she can do what? Can take it off. Ladies, that once saved, always saved is not from the Bible. That person can take that garment off, and making them no longer wearing the wedding garment and no longer ready then for that great wedding in the sky. Paul described it this way, but now you also put off all these: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy communication out of your mouths. Lie not to one another, seeing that ye have put off the old man with his deeds, and have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him. So we're supposed to have that image of Christ, aren't we? And I love the way this is put. Paul did this very many times in his writings when he talked about put on and put off. You know, we put on the good, we take off the bad as soon as we're recognizing it. And that's important. That was in Colossians 3, verses 8 through 10. So let's kind of sum up what we've been talking about. I believe we've seen that in chapter 21, the Jews were continually testing Jesus or questioning him, questioning his authority. They began plotting against him there, and the parable of the wedding feast in chapter 22 was another attempt to warn the Jews where their actions were going to lead. Where were their actions going to lead? To weeping and gnashing of teeth. Yeah, but and because you know, I think I got it in here that what they had on was not Jesus' garment. It was the garment of Judaism, wasn't it? And so they had on the wrong garment. Jesus' mind was continually on this matter that he was being rejected by the very people he loved. They were God's people, and he was loved them enough that he was willing to die for them. That's a hard love to express, isn't it? With words. How somebody could love someone enough they would literally give their life for them. And Jesus passionately sought ways to help them see and understand the truth. Some of them understood, didn't they? And at the end of chapter 23, Jesus said, he was looking at the city and he said, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you are not willing." And ladies, he said this with tears. He was like a mother hen wanting to protect the chicks. And the chicks were doing what? They were casting stones and rejecting him. So what I hope to do with this is to see that crescendo, that building that took place. And we understand that the guests of the wedding, who were invited to the wedding, were the Jews. However, one question still remains, and this is for us today. Remember that application we talked about? Who would we be in this parable? Who would we be? Would we be one who makes excuses? Because remember, they made excuses. The farmer and the business owner made excuses. One who makes light of God's invitation. What about that? Would we make fun of it? Would we? Peter talked about those scoffers who said, that he isn't coming. He isn't coming. Or would we be one who readily accepts the invitation to that feast? Would we be that happy one that accepts that invitation? And then finally, or would we be one who came to the feast with the wrong garment on? Ladies, these are powerful questions, and I have a song here that I typed out, and I got to at least read it. And if who in here has a really good song leading voice? Anybody? Do you know the song "All Things Are Ready"? Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that about this parable?